What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 15 of Mets Off Day Live. I'm your host, Michelle Margaux, and joining us today are former Mets manager Terry Collins and frequent SNY contributor John Harper. We're going to talk all things Mets over the next half hour, and we'll take some fan questions live as they come in. So put them in the chat wherever you're watching. But first, welcome to the show, Terry and John.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me on.
I see some little matchy colors with the maroon and blue. I guess I didn't get that memo, but we will continue on. Show must go on as always.
We're pairing up in a golf outing later, Michelle.
That's correct.
Well, I understand why I did not get the memo then, because I would just be the weakest link on that team. But before we get into the Mets, let's talk about what some of the guys have done since the last off day. So Francisco Lindor went to the U.S. Open with his wife and his daughters. Starling Marte got engaged, so exciting, and congratulations to him. And some congratulations are also in order to Tim LaCastro, who announced that he and his wife are expecting. And Omar Narvaez posted some of his game day fits on Instagram. But I want to circle back to the U.S. Open. Harp and then Terry, what is your favorite non-baseball game that you have gone to?
Favorite non-baseball game. Go ahead, Terry.
Favorite non-baseball game?
Yeah, like a show or event.
I went to the Ryder Cup in Detroit years ago, and it was extremely exciting. I love golf anyway. To watch these guys play was off the charts.
What about you, Harp?
Yeah, well, I would go along with it. I got to cover the 2000 U.S. Open at Pebble Beach, where Tiger ran away with it. And then I got to play Pebble Beach the next day. I won the lottery to play that next day, and that was quite a day. Although I do have to go back to, I actually covered the Michael Jordan game when he won the NCAA tournament back in 1982. So that's quite a memorable one, too.
Wow.
And Michelle, way before you were born, I was on the sidelines at the Michigan-Ohio State game in 1969. When Ohio State was ranked number one. It was Bo Schembechler's first year at Michigan, and they upset Ohio State. A buddy of mine was the defensive back at Ohio State, and there was 101,000 people back then, and it was crazy.
Wow. You guys both have some incredible resumes when it comes to other sports.
Woody Hayes on the sideline, Terry?
Woody Hayes is on the sidelines. And when the game was over, the Ohio State had a defensive lineman named Jim Stillwagon, and he ran through the locker room door when the game was over. It wasn't even open yet. He just knocked it off the hinges. It was really amazing.
I am just so happy that you knew that I was not born in 1969.
Yes, of course.
Come on, Michelle.
We're going to talk some Mets today. I know. So we are going to look at where they stand right now. They have played 6 games since our last off day. They lost 4 of them. But a positive, bright note is the MVP, DJ Stewart, 8 home runs in the last 13 games. The first Met to do so since Neil Walker in 2016, according to Sarah Langs. And he also had a game-saving catch last night and the walk-off hit by pitch. So, Terry, what does a guy like that do for a team that's in this situation right now?
Well, anytime you bring someone up, a guy like DJ who's trying for a job, I memean, he's fighting for a job next year, not just this year. They bring tremendous energy to the ball club. And every night he knows it's his stage. And so he's, his focus, his concentration is, a lot of times this time of year, guys are getting tired, guys are getting fatigued. And those guys like DJ, they're coming up and they are, just so set on showing everybody they belong and that they need to stay there. That I'm not sometimes you see this happen a lot of times late in the season to guys, and he's showing everybody that, hey, look, his name needs to be a part of next year's team.
Harp, I mean, after this kind of performance, what kind of shot does he have at making the team next season?
I'm not sure, Michelle. He's never gotten a real long shot, a real steady run in the big leagues. But he's going to be 30. He's hitting really well against right-handed pitching, so maybe he'd have a shot as kind of a platoon type guy. Or this could just be a hot streak. But I think what was great about it, I tweeted about it last night, you could just see how much this meant to him, not only last night, but this streak he's been on. This is a guy who's been grinding forever to try and get to the big leagues and get established in the big leagues. And I know from talking to Terry over the years, those are the kind of things that a manager really, you really appreciate, because those are the guys that are having to really, really grind just to try and stay in the big leagues, and to see them have this kind of success has got to be really rewarding for anybody that's working with him.
Well, it could just be a hot streak, but either way, he's doing it at the big league level and against teams that aren't terrible.
Yeah.
So I think that shows something, especially when you get consistent playing time like that. But we also got the chance to see Shohei Ohtani up close and personal this past weekend. So Harp, where realistically do you see the Mets in that race and trying to get him?
With Ohtani?
Yeah.
You know what? I've said a couple times, I really think this injury might work in the Mets' favor. We don't know exactly if he's going to need the Tommy John surgery or not, but if he's just going to be a hitter for at least for next year, some teams might, I would think are going to back off or lower their offers to some degree. And maybe Steve Cohen, the money doesn't seem to matter to him. So maybe he goes out and blows away the field now and just wants him for his offense and then hopes at some point he returns to pitching. So maybe it gives the Mets a little more of an advantage. I think a lot of it depends. We don't know. Everybody seems to think Ohtani wants to stay on the West Coast. If he's willing to come to New York, we don't know for sure what the Mets' plan is for next year as far as how much they're going to spend, how they're going to try to win, or they're going to really reset a little bit. But I'm sure if Ohtani is willing to come to New York, that Steve Cohen's going to go out and try and get him.
It's funny. We all keep saying that Shohei Ohtani wants to stay on the West Coast. And I don't know if people remember this, but we were all saying that about Garrett Cole too. He was a Southern California kid. He went to UCLA and he very much ended up as the ace of the New York Yankees. So
Baty too.
Yeah, nothing's out of reach here. But Terry, if you are the Angels, what do you do with Ohtani now? Do you shut him down, start the recovery? I mean, what is the next step in this process if you're the Angels?
Well, again, going into the fact that it's his second Tommy John, if you give him 3 weeks, so let's just say he has surgery now, and so he's got an extra 3 weeks to recuperate. That's not much. So if I'm the Angels and I'm worried about my fan base, he's playing. He wants to play. Obviously, we heard what he said. He wants to play. He wants to finish out the year. And you know what? He can certainly DH, and there's a role for him. And if he's going to move to another team, I think he's got to step forward and say, hey, look, I want surgery now. But I don't think if you're the Angels, what's 3 more weeks? I think I'd let him play.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, tomorrow is the first day of September, which means rosters expand. And according to multiple reports, Ronny Mauricio will be up with the team. So we have a fan question on this, actually. His name is Doug, and he asked, what position would you start Mauricio at? Terry, do you have any idea what you would do?
Well, I certainly wouldn't take Lindor off the shortstop. So, you know what? Jeff has such versatility. You could put him at third and put Ronny Mauricio at second base. He's more right now. I'm sure he's probably played more middle infield than he has on the corners. So that might be a spot, but you've got Vientos, so you want to see some action at third base. So again, you can use Jeff in the outfield. Jeff allows you to open up some spots for Ronny, but you might as well take a look at him, and you got to be careful. And one of the things, Michelle, as John alluded to earlier, I was told many, many years ago by one of the greatest managers in the history of the game, be very, very careful what you see in September and what you see in March. So, those guys, nobody knows him. He's brand new. So you got to just let him play, let him go out there and see how he handles things, see how he handles the big stage, all the people. But he needs to be in that lineup.
Harper, what do you expect to see out of him from an offensive standpoint? Like Terry kind of mentioned.
Yeah, it's a great question. As Terry said, September, Mets are out of it. You're not getting maybe the same look you would get if the guy was in a pennant race. But, the big question about him is you talk to a lot of scouts about it. And it's the reason the Mets haven't brought him up earlier is that, he doesn't have great plate discipline. He tends to chase breaking balls out of the zone. They've been worried that he would get exposed by Major League pitching a little bit. But now is the time to at least get a look at him and see how he does it at that level. Because you never know. I mean, Terry's seen this. Some guys, you get to the highest level, and some guys have an ability to kind of raise their game, and some guys don't. So I think you at least get some look and some idea about Mauricio, and then they do have to figure out where he's going to play because he's been a shortstop his entire career. They tried him in left. Supposedly, I've heard he didn't look comfortable out there. So I would think second base might seem the easiest. It used to be more of a difficult transition sometimes, but for shortstops because guys coming into him. But the rule now at second base, you're really not getting taken out on the double play the way you used to. So I think it makes sense to start him there. You can play McNeil, move him around a little bit. You got to find out something about Mauricio going into the offseason because you're going to have some decisions to make about next year.
Terry, when you were the manager, were there any similar like prospect fans that have been begging for all year type of scenarios, or any memorable roster expansion scenarios or stories?
Not really September call-ups. Michelle, I was very, very lucky. My first 6 years managing, we were in pennant races. So September call-ups were, they were for this. You always called up a third catcher. You called up a couple extra bullpen arms, but your lineup was set. You weren't calling anybody up to get some playing time. And if you had a prospect, in 1 year in Houston when I was managing the Astros, we had a young prospect named Billy Wagner, who was a double-A. He's pitching, he's the starting pitcher. And everybody said, let's bring him up. And the consensus was, do we start him or do we relieve him? And through all the scouts that had watched him pitch said, let's put him in the bullpen. Well, we needed help and I think it was midsummer in the bullpen. So we brought him up and put him in the bullpen. And obviously right now it belongs in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. So, but the late September call-ups, I never really got a guy that came in and sparked it and then said, boy, we can't wait till next year.
Well, we have a fan question that was going to lead me to my next question for Harp. So CP's New York Sports via YouTube said, should we be seeing Mike Vasil as part of the September call-ups or a viable candidate to fill the fifth rotation spot in 2024? So who do you think is going to take that other spot on the roster?
On the 40-man, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think it'll be Vasil, though. He's only been in AAA. He hasn't been in AAA too long. He's not on the 40-man yet. He's not eligible even for the Rule 5. So, as Terry knows, organizations like to protect these 40-man spots and use as many of them as they can. So, and I think Vasil needs a little more time in AAA. He hasn't been as effective as he was in AA. Scouts I've talked to said he just looks like, he's been a little bit gun shy as far as contact, and that he needs to trust his stuff a little bit more. So probably wouldn't hurt to let him finish out the season in AAA and then see what he can do next spring. But he is on their radar as far as a guy that he could break into the rotation, maybe coming out of camp, maybe at some point next year, depending on what else they do as far as bringing in pitchers next year.
Terry, when it comes to Brett Baty, do you think that we're going to see him back in the big leagues? And what does he need to show in Syracuse in order to make that happen? And could he take that 28th spot?
Well, one of the things that Ronny Mauricio is going to face, Brett Baty's already faced it. And that is he's going to be exposed to outstanding pitching. And he's going to now say, hey, look, I've got to be able to do this better, whatever that might be. And so, yeah, I think Brett Baty will come back to the big leagues. I would be surprised. I would be shocked if he wasn't somebody who shows up tomorrow, again, back at the major league level. So I think that, Brett's going to go down. He's a terrific athlete. He's going to understand it. He's going to get it. And I know from being around him. I mean, I remember first time I saw him, and the next year he got himself in shape because he said, hey, to play this game for 6 months, you better get in the top shape. And he's done that. So I think he'll make any adjustment it takes to become a better player. And I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Brett Baty start to really take off as a player. That's
great to hear. And we're going to switch gears a little bit to Buck Showalter here. After the season, Buck's only going to have 1 year left on his 3-year contract. And 2024 is obviously looking a little bit more like a rebuild year, which is not what they expected. What do you think is Buck's future with the team, Terry, not just next year, but even through years after that, potentially?
Well, I think that's going to be Buck's call in myself. I'm sure he's extremely frustrated with what's happened this year. But he's a pro. He's been through it before. He understands it. And I've always thought that there's one guy who certainly, belongs in the dugout in New York City. It's Buck Showalter. And so I think ultimately, if Buck wants to continue to manage because he knows how hard it is, he'll be the manager here. So I think that's going to end up being his call, but I certainly hope that he's back.
Well, with it potentially being his call, Harp, do you think that he makes the call to stay?
I would think he would want to come back for sure. I'm just the only caveat I would throw in there is that I think if Steve Cohen does hire a president of baseball operations, like, there's been a lot of speculation about a guy like David Stearns, he might give the decision to him and say, if you want to bring your own manager in, I'm not going to stand in your way. Sometimes that's the way these things go. And if that's the case, who knows? I mean, I guess it's possible that Craig Counsell could be available as well. The Brewers connection there. I don't know. Otherwise, but Steve Cohen has been, when he spoke in Kansas City a few weeks ago, he he was very complimentary of Buck and basically said Buck's done everything I've asked him to do. So I would think in that it sounds like he'd be back, but I do think Steve Cohen, he wants that president of baseball operations. We know that he might leave that door open to a guy like that.
Harp, you wrote an article about a month ago about the Mets getting hit by pitches. They have been in the top 4 in hit by pitches since 2019. What needs to change in order for that to stop happening?
Well, this is an old school mentality. I know that. And I really want to hear Terry's take on this because I wrote that I think at some point you have to retaliate. I think it can become an issue even in the clubhouse. If the hitters start thinking, why aren't we, these guys, don't they have our backs? Especially when Alonso, your star player, is getting hit just about as much or more than anybody in baseball, and pitchers feel like they can come inside without any response from the Mets. They're going to keep doing it and keep hitting them. And I think at some point the Mets have to respond. You know, I did ask Buck about that after a game when I wrote that column. Basically, he's not going to say much publicly about it. So I don't know exactly. He said we've talked about it internally, but I do think, and again, I want to hear Terry's take on this because I think your star players getting hit at some point, somebody's got to respond, or actually, I think that could be a little of an issue in the clubhouse.
Terry, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
How would you have handled this?
Well, John has hit it right on the head. The issue is going to be inside that clubhouse. Now, the other night when he got hit, obviously it was a breaking ball. You don't throw breaking balls and be able to command your breaking ball good enough to hit a guy in the back of the head. I mean, that was the fluke. But yeah, he has been hit a lot. I talked to Pete about it, and I said, hey, look, you're a guy who you got to be pitched inside. Today, due to the new rules, pitchers have a little trouble sometimes commanding the pitches. Everybody's throwing as hard as they can. It's not about command anymore. But I'll tell you one thing. Yes, you have to answer it. I'm sorry. And I don't think, and I know Buck, and he is going to be politically correct on how he goes, what he says and how he goes about things. But once in a while, the pitchers themselves have got to take it into their hands. I remember when I managed the Angels, we had a real good player named Garrett Anderson, and Garrett kept getting knocked down by one particular team. And Chuck Finley went to Garrett Anderson and said, I will put an end to this Friday night, and did. And he took their best player and drilled him right in the middle of the back and then went to the dugout. Said, if he goes down again, I'm getting somebody else. And it was over. It was done. Never did they knock him down again.
Well, there are probably more repercussions in this day and age in terms of this game of baseball if you do retaliate like that. But because we are on the topic of Pete Alonso, I mean, there are so many rumors that have been swirling around, whether he'll be traded and his impact on the clubhouse. And in order to clear things up, Pete had told Fox Sports, quote, my job is to play the best I can for the team. Obviously, I'm a piece to the puzzle and I'm a part of the machine, but Billy's got to do his job and I got to do mine. He has to answer the phone. It's not personal, end quote. Harp, even if there's zero truth to any of this, which Andy Martino wrote a really good article today that kind of lends itself to the fact that a lot of this is not going to happen, how much can this drama, regardless of the truth, impact Pete and the guys in the clubhouse?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on how Alonso takes it. If he does take it as, just as a professional and says, he has said publicly, he understands that the Mets have to listen in terms of any potential trade, just in case maybe a team wants to blow them away for a guy like Alonso, then if that's really how he's taking it, then I think everything's okay. If he's taking it personally, then you never know how a guy's going to react. I do think a lot of this has been overblown. I think the Mets probably, they do have to listen to that, especially after you trade Scherzer and Verlander. Hey, let's listen on anybody and just see what's out there. And I know there were reports about the Brewers maybe being interested, but I tend to believe the Mets on this. I don't think it ever got close because you would have to get a haul back for him, and that's the problem with trading a guy, a real star power guy. I don't think you're going to get what he's worth. I think a lot of this might just be contract negotiations too. The Mets want to maybe let Alonso know, we're not going to pay just judge money just because maybe you think that you're worth that. But I think in the long run, I think they get it done. I don't see how you replace the guy with that kind of power. They need that power in that lineup.
But even when Pete is publicly saying, it's not personal, I understand they have to take calls. I mean, even I, as Michelle Margaux, am getting text messages from people around the league being like, what's happening with Alonso? Is Alonso getting traded? I can't even imagine what some of the other guys in the clubhouse or the coaching staff or Pete himself or even his family are getting. So, Terry, how would you handle it as a manager, trying to handle that and manage someone like Pete? Well,
I think Pete's done a very, very good job of saying the right things. And that is the right thing, what he said. And if he believes that, that's how he should go about it. Hey, he has no control over what's going on. So just be a professional, go play. Play as good as you can play, and whatever happens, happens. He's going to get paid, whether he's in New York or if he's in Milwaukee or if he's in LA. It doesn't matter where he goes. He's going to get paid. What he can't do is let it affect his play on the field, because it is a business. And we've heard a lot of guys talk about, hey, look, I know this is a business. And that's what happens. I mean, who would ever thought Freddie Freeman would be gone from the Atlanta Braves? It just happens once in a while. So, and I think Pete's approaching it the right way. I know Buck has probably said, hey, look, we can't worry about anything else except trying to win baseball games here. And I'm sure Pete's bought into it. It doesn't matter what all the other guys are saying to him. Oh, we can't trade you. We can't trade you. Okay, that may be true, but you know what? Again, that stuff, they don't control that. They can only control what they do when they get on that field. And I think Pete's approached it the right way.
We do have another fan question from Kathy from Facebook that said, what is it going to take to get Pete extended? So, Harp, what do you think? What do you think a potential extension could look like for Pete?
I think that's really the key question, Michelle, just because, Judge got 9 for 360. And that if you're Alonso, you can say, hey, I'm hitting as many home runs as Judge, or just about as many, but obviously he's not the same kind of player defensively. He's not the same all around player, but he does mean a lot to the Mets. Then you look at the comps with maybe the first baseman for the Braves. I'm blanking on
Matt
right
Olson.
Now. Right. Olson, I think he got 6 for 180, something like that, or maybe 7. But I think it's got to be something. I think the Mets are going to try and limit the range, because Pete's going to be 30 years old. I would think they like to keep it to a 6 or 7 year deal at maximum for something. I think they're going to have to give him something close to $30 million a year, though.
Terry, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't really follow that stuff. John does a much better job of following it, but I think he's right. I think it's going to be $30 million a year. He's going to get Judge kind of money. Now, for the length of it, just as he said, he's 30 years old. He's going to be, you've got to certainly say 6 years at perhaps $30 million a year. And his agent may be saying, hey, it's going to start with a 2. I have no idea. I try to stay out of that stuff as best I can. I know that he's going to be able to buy a car when he wants to buy a car. I know that's going to happen.
Let's switch gears to pitching. Looking ahead to 2024, the Mets are going to have to fill some rotation spots. So from an internal standpoint, who has the best shot at making the rotation between David Peterson, Tyler McGill, and Joey Lucchesi?
I've liked what I've seen lately of Tyler McGill. I think he's made 5 or 6 starts since he's come back in the rotation, and he's had a kind of a tough go. He's had the Braves twice, the Orioles once, and the Texas Rangers once. 3 of the best offenses in baseball. And he's held up well. He pitched really well the other night against the Rangers. The velocity's back up to where it was before he hurt the shoulder last year. It's in more like the 96, 97 range. He's worked on his off-speed stuff. He's got a pretty decent curveball changeup. He's got potential, but he's been really inconsistent. He still has issues with his control. I think Lucchesi is kind of a depth guy. I think McGill has the best chance to kind of work himself back into one of those back end spots in the rotation.
Terry, from an external standpoint, who do you think the Mets realistically should be targeting?
Wow. To be honest, Michelle, if the next to their name it has pitcher, go get them. If they're out there, go find they got to go find some relief pitching. They've got to find some starting pitching. And if there's names out there, there's guys who they think are durable. The one thing that we've seen happen here in the last couple of years, the big names, they've thrown a lot of baseballs, and these guys are signing on, and they're not coming back and showing that they've got, the same kind of stuff the next year especially after if they pitched for 7 or 8 years. So I just know that whoever it is, if they think that they can give them 30 starts, that their health is good, and they can keep get some quality starts in there, I think the Mets are going to have to go after them.
I actually really like that answer. Go ahead.
Michelle, I was just going to say, I think the key there is we're not sure. Again, I mentioned this earlier. Are the Mets going to be all in for 2024? It doesn't sound like it based on what we heard from Scherzer and Verlander, why they waived their trade options. But, I mean, a guy like Blake Snell is maybe going to be the top guy, but are you going to give him a 7 or 8 year deal? And he's age 30. I don't think they want to do that. I think they want to get younger. I think that's why this Japanese pitcher, Yamamoto, makes a lot of sense. He's only going to be 26. I think maybe that's where they would go, somebody like that, and then maybe some of the lower ends of the market. But I don't think they're going to spend at the very top of the market.
Yeah, both those answers are really good. But speaking of rotations, Terry, you managed one of the best Mets rotations in recent years with DeGrom, Syndergaard, Wheeler, Harvey, and Steven Matz. So out of that group, who shocked you the most with where they're at today in 2023?
Well, I guess you would have to say Matt. I mean, this guy was the best pitcher in baseball, in 2013. And, I know the injuries that outlet syndrome injury he had really curtailed his pitching, because I thought this guy was going to be, I thought he was going to break the bank. I thought he was going to be a Garrett Cole kind of guy, get lots and lots of money. I was shocked with what that injury caused. And obviously I'm very, very surprised at what's happened with Noah. Here's a guy that's a tireless worker, great shape. Matter of fact, one time he asked me, why haven't I ever had to have Tommy John? And I said, I have no idea. There's a lot of guys who had great stuff and great arms that didn't have Tommy John. So you know what, keep doing what you're doing, and don't worry about being hurt. And so now I think that injury, and that'll show you not everybody bounces back from it. And here's a guy who's bigger and stronger than anybody else probably who ever stood on that mound, who has not been able to bounce back from Tommy John. And those guys probably are the two that have shocked me the most.
Harp, if you could have any one of those 5 guys that I just mentioned on the current Mets, who would you want?
I'd have to take Zach Wheeler. DeGrom's hurt, obviously. Wheeler's been really, really good for the Phillies. He should have won the Cy Young 2 years ago. He threw 30-some more innings, almost 40 more innings than Corbin Burns, who won it. I thought he should have. I think he finished second. And he's been really durable. When Terry was there, he missed a couple of years. It took him 2 full years to come back from the Tommy John. And I think it took him a while to trust that he was finally healthy. But he's been, and I thought I wasn't sure that the Phillies made the right move just because they paid so much to get him, but because he had shown signs of it with the Mets, but it was never able to put it together for a full year. But he's really blossomed, and he's a big time pitcher. He showed it last postseason, and I think he's got years to come. He's got such a fluid motion that athletic. I think he's going to be good for a long time.
Yeah, Mets pitchers that go to the Phillies seem to really thrive at Citizens Bank Park, like Taijuan Walker. I mean, it just feels a little salt to the wound here, but we usually do a game called One Word and Why, but this time we're going to do One Name and Why. So I'm going to ask you a question and you give me a name and why you think they fit. So Terry, what prospect excites you most?
Well, Francisco Alvarez. I mean, it's what he's done. What he's done offensively is amazing. And I'll tell you, he has really grown as a catcher. I've been very, very impressed. He's still got some things he's got to work at defensively, but I'll tell you, he's come fast.
Does that count as a prospect? Are we counting that? I like you, so I'm going to count it, but I don't know.
Well, you mean somebody who's not in the big leagues yet?
That's the way I view it, but.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you, from what I've seen and read about it, Mauricio would be my guy. I mean, here's a switch hitter with power from both sides. He's a big guy. He plays the middle of the infield. They're hard to find. DJ LeMahieu is 6'5" and plays second base. So, those big guys, they can do some things. And if Ronnie comes up and he learns how to command that strike zone a little bit better, he's got a chance to be pretty special.
Harp, do you want to answer that question? I'll let you if you'd like, but he gave 2 answers.
Sure. Since Terry just talked about Mauricio, I'm really anxious or curious to see what he looks like. But I'll go down a little farther. Some of these guys they just acquired. I wrote a column about this Ryan Clifford, guy with big power. Scouts really think he might be the better of the two guys they got from the Astros just because of the power potential. They say he's got a pretty good approach to the plate. He's got a good plate discipline. He does strike out a lot, but he's got the kind of power that they think could translate to big time in the big leagues. So he's a guy that, he's probably at least another year, maybe 2 away. But he's a guy that I want to see if he grows into these kind of scouting reports I'm hearing about.
Okay, Terry, one name and why. Who do you think is the current leader of the franchise?
Well, from the way he's gone about things, and he seems to be the guy that's there all the time for answers, I'd have to say Francisco Lindor. I mean, I've never seen him shy away from a question. He's in the clubhouse a lot. That's what the reporters, that's what the writers like. They want that guy who's always there, who's going to stand up. I think Pete's also one of those guys. I think Pete wants to be the leader, but I think, Lindor's track record kind of puts him in that category for me right now. And he's playing that prime position and hitting in that middle of that order. So that's the guy I would name.
What about you, Harp?
Yeah, I think those guys, Lindor certainly. I think he wants to be that guy, and I think I think he's grown into the role more. I think he tried maybe a little too hard his first year to be that guy, and sometimes, as Terry knows, it's got to kind of come naturally. Guys have to gravitate to a certain guy. I'll tell you who was a leader. I thought last year was Scherzer. He came in there with his work ethic, his intensity. I thought he changed the culture in there, and to see him in that clubhouse, guys did gravitate toward him. They, just everything he's done and the way he goes about his business. I think that's the kind of guys that usually kind of you're drawn to as a leader. And I would throw Nimmo in there just because how hard he plays the game. I think he's grown into that too. So I think guys respect when guys really work hard, play the game the right way. I think guys respect that. So I think, I don't know if there's one specific guy, but I think there's some leaders in that clubhouse still.
Terry, who will have the biggest bounce back in 2024?
Jeff McNeil. He can hit. He can really hit. And I think, he's going to, just as he adjusted to when he first came up to the game itself, I think he's going to sit back this winter and say, okay, I might pull a little bit more than I've had in the past because, now that they've covered the left side of the field because there's no shifts anymore. I think his bat to ball skills are so good. I think he's going to have a big year.
Harp?
I would go along with that for sure. He's just too talented. That hand-eye coordination, we know golf, baseball, whatever. He's too pure a hitter. But I'll throw in Marte as well. This was kind of a lost year for Marte. He had that. I think in retrospect, there was that double groin surgery or whatever he had, core surgery. I think really took a toll on him, maybe more so than anybody knew at the time. He never looked like the same guy. And I know he's 34 now, so age might start to be an issue. But he's such an athlete that I think he'll bounce back and have a much better year as well.
That's a great answer. I didn't even think of Marte. All right, so looking ahead, the Mets start September with 3 against the Mariners and then 2 against the Nationals. So who is your X factor for the next 5 games, Terry?
Wow. Oh, man. The way they've been playing. I mean, I still, Michelle, for me, you still, to me, got to lean on your key guys. They're the guys, what DJ Stewart's going through right now. That's great. That's unexpected. But what you've got to have is you've got to have the 2 or 3 guys in the middle of that lineup produce because they're the guy. That's what they're getting paid for. That's why they've been hitting there all year long. So I'm looking at, Lindor, Alonso. I think Jeff's hitting 5th now, so you've got to look at those guys and say they've got to get it done the next, this month.
Harp, what realistically do you think should be the team's goal for the rest of the season?
I think at this point, it's really. I mean, you try to get to 500. I mean, but they know they're not really in a race. I think guys have to just play the game the right way, play hard, and at this point, it does become a little bit more of an individual game, just because guys have to look out for what they're going to do next year. Some of them, especially. But I want to throw in, just to go back to your last question, I want to see what Mauricio. Remember how much the kind of team seemed to be energized when Alvarez came up, even Vientos came up. I want to see if maybe Mauricio can have that effect on these guys as well, and maybe he becomes a little bit of an X factor down the stretch.
That is such a good thought. All right, so today is an off day, and we always talk about what the Mets have done on their off days, but I want to know how you guys are spending your off day. I already know the answer, but Terry and Harp, you guys kind of have the same off day happening, and it's not a golf tournament. You guys are not playing together.
That's true, but I am playing. So, it just may not be with Harp,
I figured,
but I am playing.
Yeah, it would be hard to make the tee time with Terry since I'm 1,000 miles away or so, but I would love to be in that foursome with Terry. I'm going to have to settle
Michelle, you got to remember now, the hurricane just took all the bad weather out of here. So it's even though it's still pretty hot, it's not as humid as it was, and the course dried out with all that wind we had, so it's a good day to play.
I thought you were on BNNY tonight.
I am.
Oh, well, you failed to mention that part.
Well, so that's not an off day for me.
It's like golf and then BNNY.
For the next 5 hours, I'll be at the country club.
That's a quick round.
I had to settle for just a workout at the gym. Couldn't do much more. Still not back on the racquetball court yet, Michelle. I'm still recovering, but I'll get there eventually.
Good. Well, I appreciate you both so much for spending some time with us here. Thank you so much to the people who are watching this latest edition of Mets Off Day Live. We will be back with another episode